everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 6, or episode 30, of the Apothecary Diaries, season 2. And things are getting a little juicy with these cousins that have mysteriously shown up in the envoy. They seem like they want to get up with the with Papa Bro, with the Emperor and Jinshi. Jinshi as the brother of the Emperor, not Jinshi as the eunuch. But we'll see where that goes, right? So I've got some comments I want to talk about before we start this episode, but I'm very curious moving forward what we're going to get. And in the background of this envoy and all that's happening around it, there is Gyokyo, who is pregnant, and they're trying to kind of hide it for political reasons. There's also the thing with Lihua and Sheen, and there's this weird energy between them that we're trying to figure out. There's the whole Lolin and Shisui thing that we're trying to figure out. So there's lots of pieces on the chessboard that we're trying to navigate, and Gaoshun just wants a salary raise for his job matchmaking. So I've got comments from episodes 3 all the way through episode 5, so we might as well just dive in. Rhett the Best for episode 3's comment, the only one I have for that one, says, in the novels, it states that Xiaolon is studying writing with the other girls. That since she is, MaoMao has to go to the quack for gossip. So Xiaolon is busy studying in the writing academy, and so that's why MaoMao's hanging out with the quack so much. It's implied in the show, but not outwardly stated, that is why MaoMao first became friends with Xiaolon. She just wanted the gossip. MaoMao doesn't want to admit it. MaoMao doesn't want to admit that she might be a secret diva like Jinshi, but her and Jinshi might have more in common than they think, right? In the show, MaoMao claimed that she was the one who washed her arm after she touched the mushroom. In the book, Loman dunked MaoMao's arm in cold running water as soon as he saw it. So that makes a lot more sense to me, because the way that it scarred and the way that MaoMao talked in the anime episode, it sounded immediate. And I was like, oh, that quickly? But then we find out that Loman dunked it and stuff. It seemed like there maybe was some exposure time. So that makes a lot more sense. Also, Rhett says, my favorite line from this section of the book was, quote, the dedicated, fastidious Gaoshun. He had every last mushroom disposed of. The heartless monster. Gaoshun's one of my favorites in this whole series. He is just looking out for everyone. He's such a literal dad, literally and figuratively. I love him so much. So thank you, Rhett, for that comment. Clayton Wise, 5547 for episode 4, our only comment for episode 4, says, hi, I just wanted to point out that what was given to MaoMao was not the Ox Bezor, but a bear gallbladder. It was stated that demand for Ox Bezor had suddenly went up, and as an act of good faith, she was given the bear gallbladder. Okay, yes, in the discussion and reaction, I was thinking the Ox Bezor, but going back to the episode, yeah, it was a bear gallbladder. So that's why it was said, and I was like, a bear gallbladder? Don't you mean Ox Bezor? No, that it was the bear gallbladder, so I'm glad you clarified that. The Ox Bezor is still out there somewhere. Jinshi could be holding it out for a special case, but that's good to know, so thank you. And then the last 2 comments I have are for episode 5. One is from Anime Annie, and this one has 2 parts. The first part says, to approach the Emperor of all people is an extremely bold act, but could also be construed as the envoy disrespecting the country's beliefs and norms. The blinds being down for the Emperor's concubines could be to hide them from view of male guests attending, but for the Emperor in ancient China, it was a disrespectful act to look at the Emperor's face unless given permission. Such an act could even be punished by death. So by covering his face when in public like this, it does protect the others present to watch from accidentally being charged with having looked upon his face. So yeah, it's like classic case of these 2 envoys not understanding the cultural norms and just walking right up being like, who cares about your cultural significance? And so that makes a lot more sense. The second part of their comment says, I don't believe it was a mistake with the translation. Jinshi wants to come up with a way for the non-eunuchs to make medicine in the rear palace. The only doctor there is the quack doctor, who has been established as a eunuch. As the Emperor has banned creating new eunuchs, this means there will be no one able to replace the quack doctor if they ever need to, or for new blood to join in easing the quack doctor's current work overload. By saying non-eunuchs, though this does mean that Jinshi could be looking for a way anyone could make medicine and carry out doctoring no matter their gender, and not just male doctors being committed to the rear palace without becoming eunuchs as was previously required. So yeah, it is a way to kind of fill a ever-growing void that is becoming more and more present, and also Jinshi could use that ruling in a number of ways. I kind of feel for Jinshi because I work at a school, and when we talk about like staff and staff getting ready to retire and the need to replace that staff, and especially if they do something huge, like in the Quack Doctor's case, make medicine for the entire rear palace, it would be important to get some interns in there, get somebody transitional in there, to learn from the Quack Doctor as much as they could before taking over, how that all works. So I totally feel Jinshi's dilemma. I have experienced it myself in the workplace, so that makes a lot of sense. So thank you, Anime Annie. And then Elfreya shared my qualms with episode 5, saying, I feel MaoMao is too smart and knowledgeable about the rules and the hierarchy of the real palace, and has a father who worked in the rear palace as an apothecary. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but the definition of an apothecary is someone who makes medicine, to be in the dark about this in the 11th hour. Jinshi warning about girls not being allowed to mix medicines. I feel she's mixed stuff in front of plenty of people, unless you don't count drugs like aphrodisiacs as medicines. I wonder if this originates from a fear of being poisoned. Not like you need to be mixing medicine to poison someone. So it's very bizarre, and it just feels like they're trying to throw something in which we can feel is clearly sexist and have our protagonist feel helpless about it. At the end of the episode, this out-of-the-blue medicine rules raises a lot of red flags. And yeah, that was really my only kind of qualm with last week's episode, was I was like, she's been mixing medicines for 28 episodes, and nobody's thought to tell her this. Like, especially with the aphrodisiacs, I'm like, you would think after that episode, Jinshi would be like, hey, by the way, I know you made this chocolate for everybody, but don't be making medicines. Like, that should have happened a season ago. So I felt a little down last episode because I hold this series up to such a high level of writing because it's so smart, that this felt like such an obvious, like, oh no, don't mix medicines. It's not like we're going to next episode have a red flag go off and MaoMao's going to be, confronted about mixing medicines. It just felt really obvious and surface level. And I was like, who wouldn't have caught that? So I hold this series up to a high standard, and this felt like it was lowering the bar a little bit. So I'm going to, maybe there's something in the novel with that, but I still love this series so much, but that part made me go, why are we being so obvious? So we'll see where it goes to, but I'm glad, Elfreya, that I'm not the only one who thought that. So anyway, thank you all so much for your kind words and comment. I'm super excited for this episode. There's so many pieces on the board that I want to see where it goes, but in any case, I hope you all enjoy this episode and reaction, but we're going to start episode 30 of the Apothecary Diaries. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we're wrong, and we should have more faith in the writing of a show when we question things. And sometimes red herrings are there, and sometimes we're just wrong. And this is one of those times. Touché, Apothecary Diaries, touché. Honestly, I was getting so frustrated at the start of this episode because, like I said, I hold this series to a high standard, and I was like, this just feels like such a misdirect, and so obvious. Well, yeah, it was an obvious misdirect, and I should have had more faith in where it was going. So now we're past that. This was a very good example of Romania needs to have faith in the shows that she enjoys, and now we've learned that lesson, and we'll move on from here. Yeah, I will say the one thing was, I think they could have set up in season 1 that she wasn't supposed to let people see her do medicine, and maybe they could have just touched back on it last episode and just reminded us about that since it had been a season. Bringing it up for the first time last episode did seem weird. Now it all makes sense, and now it's like, okay, well, now we see where we're going to from there. But, and I do feel like with the Emperor in the final scene, it's going to have a point to play, and we'll theorize about that when we get to it. But this was a great episode. This is one of my favorite episodes of the season so far. I loved this episode. I was like, I love when MaoMao gets on a roll and she gets vindictive and she gets like the sense of justice. There is something about Lihua's pavilion that brings this sense of justice to MaoMao. And whenever we're in Lihua's pavilion, we get this like justice vigilante MaoMao, and I am here for it. I love when, that's to me when MaoMao's like at some of her best, is when she's like, let's crack this case wide open. So going back to the OP, I love that as we go through this OP, more and more is going to become obvious to us, the viewer, as we go. We get to the hand opening scene. We are now at episode 6, so we're halfway through the first cour with using this. So I would definitely think that the flowers with the little buds, that is the indication of this episode. The flowers that can cause abortion if you make the medicine for it, that they're present there. I think that's good. So we're left with the pin, whatever that rock is, the paper that could be medicine, the black ribbon, and the frog. Those are the last ones that we have, the last 5, which we technically have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We technically have 6 episodes of this cour, I believe, left. So 5 images left. I'm sure that we may have an episode that doesn't have an image. Maybe episode 12 won't need one of these, but we'll see. We'll see. But the white flowers make a lot more sense now. So we'll touch base on that as we get to it. So yeah. So this woman that I thought was going to be a total Karen, I was really, really excited. And I love that that's the misdirect the show gives us, is that we think this old woman in the clinic that finds out that MaoMao can make medicine, we think she's going to be a total Karen. She's going to write a letter to the emperor. We think that that's totally the case. Now, she wrote this letter. I feel like it's not the same letter that was written by Jinshi, the same request. It's something different, right? So that is relatively important. We don't know why she has this letter, what it says. That part is still a little bit of a mystery to us. So there's a little bit of mystery that could carry on in a future episode. We have the idea that somebody in the rear palace, whether it's the envoy, whether it's somebody working with them, we've suspected it might be Lolan. We suspect it might be Lolan and her dad working behind the scenes. Someone is offering up information about how to induce an abortion using the various drugs and things like that. Someone's offering up that information. I feel like it's tied to Lolan and her dad because they're the newest entries into this. And I doubt it's Lishu. We know it's not Lihua at this point. We know it's not Gyokyo's court. So Lolan is kind of the common denominator. But whether or not it is her and her dad and how they're working with the envoy, all of that is still a mystery to us. But this woman that was the misdirect, what I really like about this is that it all kind of adds up because the woman, the older woman that works in the clinic, she's found out about the servant of Lihua's that's stuck in the shed that went missing. She didn't know she was stuck in the shed, but she knew she went missing and she had been sick and it was a concerning cough and she's worried about it. The thing of it is, what's so fun about this series is that people's interests, whether they are the people's interests for one thing, inadvertently causes benefit or doom for something else that they don't even understand or expect. So for example, the woman in the clinic, she wanted MaoMao to make medicine and MaoMao to investigate the missing servant that had been sick, not because she cared about Lihua. No, she didn't know Lihua was pregnant, so we don't think she knows that Lihua is pregnant. She didn't care about Lihua or the Crystal Pavilion at all, but she thought that the person being sick might at some point, now this is conjecture, we don't have facts, this is just what the show leads us to possibly believe, so don't call me out in the comments. But we have the idea that the woman that was the Karen in the clinic, that we thought was going to be the Karen, she has the same color eyes as Gyokyo, which I love that fact of that kind of like making a little cultural statement of, oh, the women in the western part have eyes that are green commonly, you know, so it gives like a little marker. So MaoMao's conjecture is, well, she's maybe from the same place that Gyokyo is, so she has some loyalty to Gyokyo. And then which we can kind of confirm that because when she found out MaoMao was working for Gyokyo, she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to call you out for making medicine. I had no clue you're working for Gyokyo. So it's like, once she found that information out, she's clearly loyal to her own people. Like, oh, you're working for the hometown girl? Oh, no, you're fine. You're cool. So, but if she thought that servant's sickness over in the Crystal Pavilion was a potentially highly contagious disease, she would have interest in making sure that woman was cured because she doesn't want Gyokyo to get sick and possibly doesn't want a potential baby from Gyokyo to get sick and possibly, you know, be aborted. So that's a really big thing. What's funny is her attention at wanting to keep Gyokyo safe inadvertently ended up helping Lihua. So at this point, Lihua's pregnant. We get confirmation of that, basically. And Gyokyo's pregnant. So again, we're getting a similar situation as season 1, where we have these 2 women that are possibly going to have heirs to the throne. So now it's like that makes everything a little bit more complex, because now instead of just keeping Gyokyo safe, we have to keep Lihua safe as well. And we have established in this episode that Lihua's servants are, by design, kind of ditzes and kind of are not on top of things. Like, I feel like Gyokyo, she's street smart and she keeps women around her. She's like, I have a few of you ladies, but you few ladies that I have are top of the line, top notch. I can trust you. You're here for my well-being. You'll do what I ask. You're smart. You're competent. House is secure. Whereas Lihua, Sheen had basically filled up Lihua's house with a bunch of ditzes who don't really know what they're doing. Kind of like Li Shu's whole deal, except Li Shu's not really in any imminent danger right now. So it's so interesting to see the differences between there. But I like the way they twisted the whole plot line with the woman in the clinic. I really love that. Also, I like the fact that Gyokyo sent a chaperone with MaoMao, because at this point, if this episode was any indication, I don't think Gyokyo and Gaoshun have a problem with MaoMao being so gung-ho and justice-filled and vigilante and vindictive. But they're also like, girl, you sometimes get ahead of yourself. And and what's so interesting is that for MaoMao, who at the start of season 1 was like, I am not emotional, I am in control of my emotions, girl sometimes isn't. Her and Jinshi both are more similar than they want to let on. Both of them have this veneer and they have this persona where they're like, oh yeah, I'm totally in control of my emotions. Me, emotions, we've got this locked down. But then we've seen both times where Jinshi and MaoMao have kind of let their emotions go run wild. And it's like, well, sometimes you are. But yeah, the green tinted eyes. Is she from the Western region like Lady Gyokyo? She seemed like a tough mother hen type yesterday, but it's still intimidating with the T. And she's like, I had no idea you worked for the precious consort. Again, it's who you know in the palace. In the rear palace, it's all about who you know, who you work with, who's working with who. And it's like, uh-huh. And she's like, court ladies from outside the pavilion often use these titles. And so she's like, I asked you to visit for your help. And so that's when she tells MaoMao that there is a servant working for Lady Lihua that I want you to take some medicine to. So I wonder if that letter at the very beginning of the episode was the woman trying to... Okay, that makes more sense. I wonder if at the very beginning, the letter, the woman at the clinic was like, hey, Lady Sheen, I thought that, you might notice one of your servants is sick. She's not coming to the clinic. Could you send her over and let me quarantine her and get her some medicine? That letter at the very beginning could have been Lady Sheen being like, no, we're fine. Don't worry about it. Mind your own business, and try to sweep it under the rug. And so then, of course, she would have been like, something's up. So I want you to take some medicine. And she's like, I'm aware. Because then I like that the one lady in waiting for Gyokyo was like, you're asking MaoMao to make medicine. Did you not hear if MaoMao's found out making medicine, she could get in a lot of trouble? And she's like, look, you seem competent, more competent than our quack doctor. How about you make some stuff and take it over there? And MaoMao, who by nature, whether she wants to admit it or not, likes helping people and likes helping those that are disenfranchised, she was like, okay, I'll do it. Let's go. So anyway, this servant girl that got sick was one handling the laundry. She was handling the laundry around the time the caravan came. She was fatigued, had a fever, and she also had this strange cough. Now, they don't explain the cough in the episode, but I'm sure maybe in the novel they explain the cough. I'm sure Rhett the Best is going to tell me at some point when we get to this episode, because they tend to give some novel details. But what I thought was interesting was that there's a lot of possibilities that don't quite get explained. I like this series when they solve the mystery, there's still usually an element or two that doesn't get a proper explanation. So we, the audience, just have to kind of theorize for ourselves. And that may be because they don't want to reveal their full hand. And this cough is going to come up later in future episodes. So they don't want to tell us yet what it's all about, because we may discover it later. But my theory is that she was handling all the laundry that was being infused with all the scented oils. And it could be that she got an adverse reaction to the scented oils and got sick because of it. And then it just got worse and worse. Or the sickness is just like a non sequitur. It's off by itself. But she found out about the oils, confronted Lady Sheen. And then when she got sick, Lady Sheen was like, well, I'm just going to have you die. And then you can't tell anybody about what you saw and what you found out. Seems like that. Because when she tried to discredit the girl's testimony later on, I was like, then that probably means that there's something to it. And she's like, that cough needs to be looked at. So it seems like the cough and the fever and everything may have just been a non sequitur, that it was just a sickness. Because later MaoMao's like, yeah, she's sick and it's contagious, but it's not super strong. But Lady Sheen was probably like, she may know more than she needs to know. And now that she's sick, I don't want her going to the clinic and spreading any gossip. So we're just going to keep her here. And then she was going to literally die. And Lady Sheen was like, oh, well. I was like, I think that in itself speaks more than anything. I think the fact that Lady Sheen was willing to take a fellow woman that she worked with, shove her in a shed and be like, well, if she dies, she dies. I think that speaks more to her character than a lot of the things that she does in this episode. At that point, when she was like, oh, she dies, whatever, I was like, oh, you need to go. Because that kind of attitude is ruthless. And maybe very Empress-like behavior, but maybe Empress-like behavior for a few emperors prior, not this current emperor. I was like, holy shit. And the fact that it's been 2 weeks that she's been stuck in the shed, not getting proper care. Girl's lucky to even be alive, although it seemed to have progressed, really advanced. And like MaoMao's like, look, this does warrant investigation. MaoMao's like, a weird cough. I feel like MaoMao's like, a weird cough, this could be something really bad. And she's like, it's kind of my duty now that I know to investigate and make sure stuff's going on. I am glad that Gyokyo's lady-in-waiting does call MaoMao out and say, okay, if we're going to investigate this, you need to clear it through Jinshi and we need to cover all our bases, get all the red tape out of the way. I like the lady-in-waiting's like, you have a tendency to kind of jump in and ask questions later. And that works for you when you're with Jinshi because Jinshi likes you. But if you jump in the hoop too soon without the right clearances, you could get in trouble. And MaoMao's like, okay. Which she does it masterfully in this episode. It was handled so well. She's like, I'll need to ask Jinshi to make the introduction. But then after that, she's already thinking about what she could do beyond that. Which is great. I love it. And around that time, she then sees the little, in my area, they're blue-tailed lizards. They're like little tiny lizards like the one that she catches, and they have blue tails. And their tails, like as a defense mechanism, they break off. And it's gross. It's super creepy, but it doesn't hurt the lizard. It's just like it's a joint in their tail, and it just snaps off, and then they can scurry away. It's like, to escape. But I love the idea that MaoMao is out here catching little lizard tails. Right? I feel like Shisui would be right there with her. Shisui would be like, oh, we're going to catch lizard tails? All right, let's do this. But I also love that it makes me feel like Xiaolon is much more hardy because this lady-in-waiting faints at the sight of a lizard tail, whereas Xiaolon during the moth exercise was like, let's get all these caterpillars. And the eunuchs were like, oh my gosh. Like, I think that's really, really funny. She's like, I want to make a drug to make its tail grow back. Now, I will say that way back in the early 2000s, they started experimenting. There was this dust, and I think they still use it, but it was a compound made from pig organs because pig organs are similar to humans, the most similar. But it was my friend that I competed with in speech. They did a speech about it, and it was really good. But it was called pixie dust, and it was literally dust made from pig organs and different compounds that if you put it on if you treated a severed finger with it, it would grow the finger back. It's wild. It's amazing. Look it up. It's crazy. It takes a lot of time, but it is able to do that. And so that lizard tail kind of reminded me of that. So anyway, this poor girl dying in this shed and Lady Sheen having no sympathy. Guys, we avoided a doomed Yuri this episode. Yay! Look. Am I instantly shipping the little bow-haired girl and the servant that was sick? Yes, I 1000% am instantly shipping them. But if you wanted to just say they're friends and she was just looking out for her buddy, but I mean, I think we all know. It's a month of love. Let them have some love. But yeah, she's like, I just want to take some food to my friend. And she's like, mind your own business. I don't care if she dies. And she's like, well, okay. Which really sucks. So then I like that MaoMao crosses off all of her T's and dots her I's. And she's like, you know what? If I'm going to go here with my medicine for the servant, I'm going to bring the quack doctor and we're going to do this the official way. The quack doctor is so cowardly. Like, he is so, which I get it. He's a eunuch. And as we've established last season and this season, and as MaoMao establishes this episode, eunuchs are not treated great in the rear palace. They really aren't. They have some privileges, but not a lot in comparison to the servants and the concubines, which on the one hand, hashtag feminism, because everybody's kind of on the same page. But on the other hand, I kind of feel bad for the quack doctor because he's like, I don't want to get slapped today. He very much had the mindset of, I really don't want to get hit today, but here we are. Also, those shoes that MaoMao wore, girl, how you walk in them. I love that it makes her taller than him. And so she can whisper in his ear. He very much was giving Aladdin Sultan vibes, and she was giving Jafar vibes, which she just needed the steak staff, which was great. But Sheen, so Sheen is the cousin of Lihua. Makes a lot of sense. They look very similar. And so it's all like, jealousy is an evil monster. Jealousy and envy are cruel monsters, y'all. And they kind of go to the extreme here. And so she's like, what a tall, I wonder what she was trying to say there, what a tall, and she's like, have I seen this court lady before? And she's like, oh, and she whispers in his ear, and he's like, okay, I have this request. Why he didn't pull out the request from the beginning, I don't know, but I think he was just so overwhelmed and nervous. But it's from Jinchi. Jinchi's like, we'll sign. Jinchi will sign off anything for MaoMao. He would sign a marriage certificate if he could. But yeah, so she says that all who work at the Crystal Pavilion were born and raised in noble families. They deserve their spot in the emperor's service. That makes a lot of sense because she's so proud that she's like, even though I'm the head lady in waiting, she's like, I'm from a noble family. I deserve to be here. I'm just as good as these other women, maybe just as good as the concubine. And it's like, oh. But that also explains a lot because the ladies in waiting for Lihua, if they're all from noble families, just guesstimating, but they're probably, kind of spoiled and entitled a little bit. Not like a concubine or a princess or the envoys, but probably from households where they've not, they ain't grown up on the streets, basically. Where, Lady Gyokyo, she seems to come from a little more impoverished community. Her ladies in waiting seem like they're kind of from the streets and they've worked their way up. So it's a totally different vibe, right? And then we see the dad, who has a very similar muted hair tone as the emperor, which we find out these ladies are distantly related to the empress, which is the emperor's mom. So there's a good chance that that's why they all kind of look similar. There's a relation there. But we see the two of them. For our family, it's important to earn the love of the emperor. And we see Sheen and we see Lihua. Both with, and the thing that's so crazy is Sheen being the taller woman and Lihua, there's probably an age difference there. They both at the beginning have the exact same hair pin in, showing that they have the same little bun in the back, showing that they are equals at the time. And then that ends up changing. And we see the two of them. Do you understand Lihua and Sheen? Apricot and pear. But yeah. So, and the thing about it is, I like the confirmation in this episode that Lihua does love the emperor. She doesn't care so much about being the empress. She loves the emperor, and she likes the place that she has. Whereas we find out that Sheen is not so much in love with the emperor as she is the title of empress. And I think that's a very distinct, notable thing to note, because the way that Sheen kind of alludes to in this episode is she kind of tells Lihua off in a way saying, well, you're not trying hard enough to be the empress, which is a very bold, terrible thing to say because Lihua's like the fudge. And, she lost her child thanks in no part to some of Sheen's actions from season 1, that she's lost her one child. She, I'm sure is terrified at the prospect of what happens to my other child, what could end up happening to my second kid. And then Sheen, just once she's like, well, it should have been me. I would be better at this job than you. And I'd be pushing to be empress more than you are. Envy's an ugly monster. It's not a fun time. No, ma'am. So I really like the dynamic. Anytime we get family drama, I'm kind of here for it in this series. But I was waiting for MaoMao to make a connection between the woman in the shed and Fengshin in the brothel off in the side room, because it's a very similar situation. Now, granted, where MaoMao's mother was attended to, was a nice room. Even though it was off from the brothel, it was still pretty nice off, right? So different circumstances, but the moment she hears that cough, I'm like, that I was waiting for there to be more of a connection, but you really don't need it in this episode. And she's like, what's that shed for? And she's like, oh, garden stuff. And they're like, it's for storage. And she's like, have y'all done any gardening in the area recently? And she says, no, not in particular. So then MaoMao says, well, was that garden bush always there? Or no. That's when Sheen says that. So here's an interesting thing. Sheen says, was that garden bush here already? So Sheen wasn't the one that planted the garden bush. The one that could induce abortions if the medicine's mixed right. She didn't do that. And she could have been telling the truth about the gardening not happening recently. So who's been planting the bushes? So that's a point of mystery. Being like, is it Suirei? Is Suirei doing this? Is Suirei the one behind? I mean, I said at the beginning of this discussion that I think it's Lolin and her dad, which I still kind of do. But if you told me Suirei has been working behind the scenes, sowing discontent, and if you told me Suirei was sowing discontent and spreading all this information around and trying to sway things as a way of testing MaoMao, I would believe that too. So we don't know if it's Lolin and her dad. We don't know if Shizui, Lolin. We don't know if it's Suirei. There's still a lot of mystery, but that note about the bushes makes it relevant that Sheen's not the one that put them there, even though they are designed to do the same thing as the scented oils, meaning somebody else is testing MaoMao. Somebody left that bush there as a clue, being like, hey, MaoMao, you know what this bush does. You know your horticulture. Do you think maybe this is tied to the shed and might be a clue? So either, which could be Suirei, because Suirei knows MaoMao in that regard. So it could be Suirei that's testing MaoMao and leaving these clues because they're Moriarty of the series. Or it could be Lolin if Lolin is Shizui and Shizui's noticed that about MaoMao as well. We don't know! It's all a mystery at this point, right? But MaoMao's face when she looks at Lady Sheen and like has that big evil smile on her face, that is a devious smile. That is a devious smile. That is a smile of a woman that knows that she's got you in her clutches. Like, that is terrifying. It's very much Locken, but it's like Locken, like pretty Locken. So, and MaoMao's devious. She is devastating. Her being like, well, pardon me for staying out of touch and what happened the other day, like, girl is eating this up. MaoMao, when she gets devious and kind of a monster, is like, Jinshi does not need to see this face. Jinshi reacts when MaoMao treats him like a worm, but he has to bang his head against the wall to stop a boner when he sees her smile. This would send him into orbit. This would like send him into the stratosphere. He does not need to witness this. No, sir. No, ma'am. But yeah, and I love that she distracted Sheen long enough for the doctor to get there and open up and have a reason to investigate. Yeah, I love it. And then, of course, even though the doctor brought the medicine and all of that, I mean, MaoMao made it. So, I mean, let's be real. So, yeah. And that's when she's like, oh, I love how cold Sheen is in that moment. And then MaoMao points out that you're leaving this servant to die. But also, she's like, you were burning incense to hide the smell of the sick before. So she's like, you've been acting guilty last time where you were trying to hide the fact that Lihua was sick. But here, you're literally doing the opposite, but it still is the same premise. So she's like, you're not making yourself look any less guilty. Also, the fact that this woman was willing to kill her cousin and all these people to gain power. I mean, under a different regime, that might have got you to the top, but not with this emperor, which makes me feel better for the emperor. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, the reveal about everything with the incense and the oils, all of that are worth noting. And I love MaoMao's smile when she's like, I figured it out. I've cracked the code. I've got you on lock, girl. And so then I like that she cleans her clothes up, her robes up, takes her makeup off, and then goes with Gao Shun. Also, I love her top knot. Her little top knot. She has the little, the cat sorrel, the wood sorrel, not the cat sorrel, the wood sorrel like flowers in her hair, and she has a little top bun. Super cute. I love her hair in this episode. I like that this is her crystal pavilion look. She has the blue robes and everything. I like MaoMao's crystal pavilion look. It's super cute. And I love that Gao Shun brings her there and he's like, let's get this sorted out. Right? Sheen was masterclass in trying to avoid any suspicion and avoid saying anything that would get her in trouble. Right? But I like the idea that she's like, what do they say there? She's like, she looks like Lady Lihua, and she's a beautiful woman, clearly full of pride. I also like the idea, and it's probably the heels, but the idea that Lihua ends up taller than her, even though she started out taller, I think is a pretty important note. Unfortunately, I feel a little bit for Sheen in the fact that girl had boobs. She was probably like a C cup. She probably had enough. She was well endowed. I mean, I feel for MaoMao because I think MaoMao and I are probably about the same, but I felt for her because I was like, damn, the fact that I could understand her resentment that Lihua was chosen because she had bigger boobs. And she's like, but I'm smarter and all of this. And it's like, well, you love who you love. I feel like it's so interesting that Papa Bro, he likes women with big chests that are voluptuous, but then Jinshi, he likes MaoMao, who is neither of those things. I love that. I love the fact that they like totally different women. And that's good for Jinshi, right? Good for that. But yeah, beautiful flowers attract the most attention when they're gathered in one spot. And then that's when MaoMao says, technically, given her status, it wouldn't be unnatural for her to serve as a mid-rank concubine herself. So she basically wanted to get Lihua out of the way and take her spot. And be like, well, now that she's gone, I'll go on in. And that did not happen in this episode. I loved all of this confrontation. This scene where she confronts her and it all goes down. I love it. The thing that I love most is that I felt bad because MaoMao was getting down on herself. She's like, well, the value of a servant is really low and it's unavoidable. They're going to let that servant die. There's nothing we can do. Like MaoMao sometimes gets in her head and thinks that she herself, which we've talked about this before, but MaoMao's like, well, I'm just a lowly servant. I guess there's nothing I can do. I'm like, girl, your dad is the high-ranking military strategist in the entire kingdom. I think you got a little bit more entitlement than you think you do, right? But I liked that point. She's like, on the other hand, she tries to blame a lot on MaoMao, and I was like, girl, that is a mistake, because I don't know if you realize this, but Lihua and Jinshi really like MaoMao. So I think it really was a nice continuity in this series to take from season 1, where Lihua gave MaoMao the pin, was so nice to MaoMao, was thankful that MaoMao saved her. And she's like, actually, I kind of believe this girl because she saved my life before and I'm going to stick up for her. And Jinshi's like, well, I like her, so I'm going to stick up for her. And then the moment she starts like discrediting things like, oh, we can't trust the sick servant. Oh, we can't trust MaoMao, all this. It started kind of going backwards on her. And that's where she kind of messed up. And she's like, so you knew the servant was sick. You checked on her. You have the smell of incense on you. It's the same incense that was in the bottle. So I just want to let you know this is making you look really bad and calling you out. And what I like about it is that MaoMao stepped up to smell the incense on her. And that's when she scratched her, which now MaoMao has like cat scratch, But that was all it took to raise suspicion. Again, do I like the fact that MaoMao put herself in danger to bring out a point? She literally stepped up and took the blow because she knew it would make her look suspicious and then would cause Jinshi and the others to question it. Because why would you have such a reaction if a lowly servant, as MaoMao calls herself, was trying to just make a move? Why would you get so upset unless there was cause for you to make that move? So I don't like MaoMao putting herself in danger to do that. But of course, Jinshi is like, the fudge, Jinshi had his fists clenched in the background that scene. He was keeping his cool, but his fists were clenched. Like, I think Jinshi was like, excuse me, what did you just do? Like, he had to keep it cool, and he knew MaoMao was in control of the situation. But when you look at that scene, Jinshi is like, excuse me, you just scratched my lady. And that's when Lihua takes over. And she asks what the punishment would be. And Jinshi's like, well, if she was making an abortion drug, that's like murdering a kid. So it'd be pretty bad. And she's like, what if I was the target? And that's when she reveals that she's pregnant. So it's like she is revealing that she's pregnant as well. And that's why Sheen targeted her. And then Lihua's like, what I like about this is that when we get the flashback of them as kids, it seems like they both got along and they both were like excited for the same goal. But then when you step back and realize what's going on, it's not that they both were friends when they were kids. They just both were excited about the prospect of being the Empress and being with the Emperor, you know? And so now that they're older, it comes out that no, actually they didn't get along. And Lihua's like, you never thought I was good enough. And now you're mad that I'm with the Emperor, not you. But she's like, I can't help it that he likes me more than you. And the fact that Lihua goes up and like clutches her hand and smacks her and like draws fists, I was like, damn, Lihua. I love it. I love Lihua being a brawler and her being like, I will kick your ass if you get in my way. I'm like, yes, I love that. I love that we got Lihua kind of at her worst in season 1, where she was frustrated about her kid and then she was dying and then she was recovering. So we never got to see her like fleshed out and in her fully like in command form. She's pretty in command in this moment, so good for her. Where she's like, you know, I didn't know which one of us would become the concubine, but it's me, bitch. And of course, Sheen can't take being talked down to. And she's like, I excelled in so many more things than you. She's like, why is it, it's not fair. And then MaoMao's like, well, sorry. Unfortunately, in the patriarchy, you love who you love, and your boobs aren't big enough, so I don't know how to tell you this. But yeah, they were paired up with their high status and education, but there are fools who let their emotions control them to the point of grave mistakes, and Lady Shin's one of those people. Which honestly, in hindsight, if she was doing all of this shit, probably wasn't going to work out in the long run as an empress. And then, yeah, she's like, well, why are you better than me? And Lihua's like, I'm not better than you. It's just the way it worked. Life's not fair. I feel like that's the point that's one of the painful lessons of this series is that you can't help who you love. Regardless of status and regardless of background, you can't help who you love. The thing that's so frustrating for Jinshi and MaoMao is that Jinshi, you know, doesn't believe he can ever tell her that, and he doesn't want to be rejected. And MaoMao doesn't believe that she probably would be like, me? The, you know, lady that's with the Emperor's brother's son? What? You know, so we'll see where that goes. I think that's why it's good that this is a slow burn, because right now they're still very entrenched in this series in that idea of status and how important it is to who you can be with. And this series, I feel like this episode starts to unravel that just a little bit of saying like, yeah, sure, Sheen on paper should have been the concubine, but that's not how the world works. And so I feel like this episode kind of opens that door. It cracks it open just a little bit. And then hopefully that door will keep opening as we go. Also, when she tries to throw the basket of incense oils, like Gao Shun coming in, we don't get to see Gao Shun's face, but bitch, you know, he was like, oh, hell no. I was like, oh, Gao Shun. Oh, Gao Shun. And then her calling him a filthy eunuch. I was like, I felt like the one woman from season 5 of Drag Race. I need my asthma pump. Yes. And then MaoMao just had to get that last word in. She says, you must love the Emperor very much. And of course, Sheen is like, well, yes, of course I do. She's like, what are you saying? And Lihua's just sitting there. She's like, no, I just thought that maybe you seem to love the status of Empress more. Unlike Lady Lihua. Yeah, the thing of it is that Sheen wants power in the status and to be at the top. And Lihua, she doesn't care if she's Empress. She just loves the Emperor and is just happy to be, you know, with his love. And then Lihua's like, oh, so that's how it is. And her smacking her. And then I love when she's like, she's like, do I need to do more to get her in trouble? She's like, was the slap not enough? How about this? I was like, bitch, yes, please. Freaking love Lihua. Lihua has grown on me a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm still rooting for Gyokyo being the Empress, but I think after this episode, I don't think Lihua cares about being the Empress. I think she just wants to have a good life and have her kids and be with the Emperor that she loves. I think she's happy with that. I think she doesn't really care if she's the Empress or not. But I feel like Gyokyo doesn't necessarily care about being the Empress either, but it would be more advantageous for Gyokyo because her family is not well off and her people are not well off, so there's more for her to gain from it. So we'll just see. But yeah, I like MaoMao saying she is no longer the fading, frail woman waiting for her life's thread to sever itself. All right, and they take Sheen away. I love MaoMao being so happy, being like, oh, so glad how this worked out. That's enough humiliation for her. And then she was chased away, and the two would never stand next to each other again. I'm curious who her lady in waiting will be now that that's over, right? So, Jinshi giving MaoMao the silk handkerchief. With the little blue feather on it in the corner. Seems very much like the pin that he gave her. I'm like, last season he gave her a pin, and MaoMao was like, what's this for? It's like, girl, it's a symbol of his affection for you. Here, the silk handkerchief is clearly a symbol of his affection for you. And she's like, what do I need this for? And of course, Jinshi almost seems to be like trying to do different strategies to get her to realize that, because in last season he was like, I have a pin for you. Don't you know what that means? And she was like, oh, no. Like walked on. He was like, no. Here, he's trying to go the practical route of being like, here's a handkerchief for you. You know, for the cuts on your cheek. No other reason. She's like, but I don't want to ruin this silk. And he's like, then just take it. He's like, just take the handkerchief. And then he's like, that's not the issue. I feel so bad for Jinshi because sometimes she's very deliberately dense with him, and it's funny. And then he's like, ugh. I also love that when he gets frustrated, he shows his true side, which is great. And she's like, fine, I'll take it. She's like, I don't want to get blood on this nice silk. I love her pouting. And he's like, how'd you figure out about the shed? And that's when she reveals the plants. And of course, I like the fact that when she reveals that the flower, the white blossoms, it says green and white is a combination that brings good health, but it's ironic because, the white powder packed in the seeds could induce an abortion. And Jinshi's like, they're all over the place. He's like, these flowers are everywhere. And she's like, no, it's fine. And she's like, they're harmless unless you know how to make the medicine. Now, again, if you know how to make the medicine, it is illegal for anybody except the quack doctor to make the medicine. But you know who could know to make the medicine besides? Here's the problem. This is the scary part about this conversation is that MaoMao would know how to make the medicine, but so would probably Suirei. Because Suirei has been all the time at the pharmacy. She's been doing the same things MaoMao is doing. She's like evil MaoMao. So I'm like, my problem is, and my concern is, now that we've set this up about making medicines and all of that, and now that more and more people know that she can do it, I feel like Suirei, who is our potential antagonist, could target MaoMao by making the medicine. And since nobody can prove that Suirei can make it or has made it or is making it, she could plant that on MaoMao. And the quack doctor obviously would be like, I don't know how to make it, but MaoMao would. So is that going to be something that could get MaoMao in trouble? And then it's like, do we believe MaoMao's word that she didn't make the medicine, even though it's there and she knows how to do it? Or who else could have done it? That's what I'm afraid of after this episode, is that if Suirei or Lolan or someone else knows how to make the medicine, but they also know that MaoMao knows how to make the medicine, they could pin it on MaoMao and make her seem like the culprit. Which means she needs to prove to herself that she's a good person to many people. And Lolan and, or not Lolan, but Lihua and as well as Lihua and Gyokyo believe in MaoMao, but we need to get, and Jinshi and Gaoxun believe in her, but we got to get everybody else on board. Otherwise, she's going to look suspicious. She's like, how did Lady Sheen know that the oils could be used? it's a trade good brought in the caravan. But Jinshi's like, are you saying that someone inside the palace is spreading word on how to use this? And she's like, I don't know, but we can't be too careful. And then we see the girl that's asking about the servant. And so she's fine. She'll be fine. She didn't die. Good deal. Good on us. So yeah, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about somebody trying to spread a rumor that MaoMao is trying to poison these women, and MaoMao not having, you know, the leg up to defend herself. But maybe if she can get on Jinshi and the Emperor's good side, she can defend herself. We'll see about that. So we go back to Lihua's mansion, right? And he's like, oh, is that apothecary here today? And she's like, yes. She's like, you probably know everything by now. I'm sure he does. And she has done nothing but save me. So then we have the Emperor pondering this, right, with his wine. And I don't know what to make of the Emperor in the end of this episode. Does the Emperor know that MaoMao is Locken's daughter? Does he know that MaoMao is related to Loman? And does he know about the whole situation of Loman being connected with the baby swap and Aduo? What does the Emperor know and what does the Emperor not know? Because the Emperor could know quite a bit and chooses to ignore some information because he doesn't want the implications to happen, right? Or how society dictates he should handle those implications. He could know a lot that we don't know about and just chooses not to act because he knows he would be forced to do something he doesn't want to do. Kind of like him stopping everybody becoming eunuchs because it possibly affects his brother/son. Right? So I feel like maybe the Emperor is worried about the apothecary getting involved because he feels like she could be in danger if he has to, like, you know, make a decision about her. I don't know. And then she asks, she's like, is something wrong? And he doesn't really respond at first. And he says, no. And, you know, choose the drink with it, which honestly, though, I will say that is a good little bit of parallel to Jinshi holding the drink that makes his, you know, stop having an erection, him having the impotence medicine and drinking it after a moment of reflection, and him drinking the wine after a moment of reflection. That parallel is really interesting. But then we have this random building at the end. I'm like, is that the clinic? I don't think it's the clinic. Is there a ho-oh there? Are there Bellsprout there? Are we going to Bellsprout Tower? I don't know. I'm very curious. So yeah. So overall, this was an amazing episode. I really, really, really enjoyed this episode. I'm super excited about it. I am really excited about the implications of where we could go from here with the episode. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I was wrong. I had doubts about this season. And then this episode was like, oh no, bitch, sit down. We got this. So we're back, baby. I'm so excited. But this is my favorite episode so far of the season. And next week is episode 7. We're getting closer to the rule of 8. But we'll see that. So in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye.